Taken TV is making TV watchable again. Join us on the Active Kingdom Entertainment Network. Download Taken TV from your App Store now.
Over the last 20 years, with all your support, we've been able to not only launch the original MyPillow, but also the MyPillow mattress topper, Giza Dream bed sheets, My Slippers, and the MyPillow bath towels. But there's so much more. In fact, we have over 200 products, and I'm so confident that you'll love each and every one of them that when you go to MyPillow.com now, you'll immediately receive a free gift valued at $20 just for checking out the website. No purchase necessary. Get everything from MyPillow blankets, sleepwear, kitchen towels, mattresses, duvets, pet beds, body pillows, comforters, couch pillows, bathrobes, and so much more. So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to get deep discounts on all MyPillow products. And remember, just for checking out MyPillow.com, you'll immediately receive a free gift valued at $20. No purchase necessary. This is a limited time promotion, so go to MyPillow.com now.
From the heart of our nation's capital, here's Family Research Council President Tony Perkins.
Welcome to this Monday edition of Washington Watch. Well, over the weekend, President Biden addressed the Congressional Black Caucus Phoenix Awards here in D.C.
When I came to office, this nation was flat on its back. I knew what to do. I vaccinated the nation and rebuilt the economy.
Oh, it's just that simple. Vaccinate the nation and rebuild the economy. Well, meanwhile, Republican leaders in the House worked through the weekend trying to find a way forward in an effort to keep government funded and open while at the same time reining in the out of control and wasteful government spending. We're going to talk about that in just a moment. And if it sounds as if the situation at the southern border is out of control, well, it is probably because it is. Custom and Border Protection announced late Friday that roughly 232,000 migrants crossed the border in August, a record for the calendar year, and an increase of more than 25% over July.
Was the Biden administration caught off guard by this latest surge of migrants?
Well, what you saw was the administration, as always, responding as needed to conditions, being proactive where necessary.
Were you caught off guard, though?
Look, the president did what needed to be done.
That was, of course, Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg. Well, it would appear the Biden administration is not being honest. Internal documents revealed that Homeland Security knew that this surge was coming. The Biden administration knew this surge was coming, and they did nothing. We'll talk with Texas Congressman Keith Self in just a moment. From top to bottom, the left cannot contain their disdain for parents.
I respect differences of opinions. I don't have too much respect for people that are misbehaving in public and then acting as if they know what's right for kids.
That was Biden's Secretary of Education, Miguel Cardona, in an interview Friday with the Associated Press. Let me interpret that for you. He has no respect for parents who are upset with the indoctrination that the left is doing of our children being spearheaded by the Biden administration. But here's the question. Has parental engagement in education struck a nerve with the left? I'm going to be joined by FRC Senior Fellow for Education Studies, Meg Kilgannon, later here on Washington Watch. And the more I dig into the minutia of last week's meeting of the United Nations General Assembly and the efforts of the World Health Organization, that is the WHO, to advance their global power grab, the more I am concerned. Now, this power-hungry agency, I believe, is vying to be the forerunner of one world government, a one world government. And that's not hyperbole. Jim Roguski, a member of the Law and Activism Committee at the World Council for Health, is here to provide more. And you may have seen the video of two thugs in a stolen car who intentionally ran into and killed Andreas Probst while he was riding his bike last month. His daughter, Taylor, had this to say after the second suspect was arrested last week.
Andy's life was robbed by two individuals who did not believe that lives of others matter. We believe that Andy's murder is a direct result of society's decayed family values and the strong effects that social media has on our youth.
I'll talk about that later. The website, TonyPerkins.com, resources there for you, contact information for our guest as well. Our word for today comes from Romans 1. Paul, a servant of Christ Jesus, called to be an apostle, set apart for the gospel of God, which he promised beforehand through his prophets in the Holy Scriptures, concerning his Son, who was descended from David according to the flesh, and was declared to be the Son of God in power, according to the Spirit of holiness, by his resurrection from the dead, Jesus Christ our Lord. Notice that Paul was separated to the gospel. This is not semantics. This is significant. We're not called away from or out of the world. We're called to Christ, and we leave the world behind. It is not about being emptied of something. It's about being filled with something. Following Jesus is not a list of don'ts. It is a to-do list. To find out more about our journey through the Bible, go to frc.org/Bible or join me each morning for a short devotional at tonyperkins.com. Well, with government funding set to expire at midnight Saturday, Republican leaders in the House worked through the weekend to find a way forward through the current GOP impasse. Speaker of the House Kevin McCarthy plans to move forward with 4 of the 12 appropriations bills in the House this week, which he hopes will move conservative members to support a short-term funding mechanism that will allow the House to remove the remaining appropriation bills through the floor and over to the Senate. Joining me now to discuss this and more is Congressman Robert Aderholt. He serves on the House Appropriations Committee. He represents the 4th Congressional District of Alabama. Congressman Aderholt, welcome back to Washington Watch. Good to see you.
Well, Tony, always good to be with you. Thanks for having me on.
Well, I know you've been involved in some of the negotiations and conversations because you and I spoke over the weekend, and I've spoken to the House Speaker. What's the latest on the budget negotiations? Have Republicans found a way forward?
Well, as of right now, the Speaker, my understanding is that he wants to bring up 4 bills this week, and that would be the defense, a Homeland Security bill, appropriation bill, along with a foreign operations and an agricultural appropriation bill. The last communication I had was all of those bills would be under one rule. It would move forward, but each individual bill would be debated separately. And that was in one response because a lot of members, and rightly so, a lot of members have been concerned about the fact that we've not been bringing individual appropriations to the bills to the floor in the last several years. And no one wants to see them lump them together. And so this is a way to force, to call the hand of the leadership and say we need to move forward on these bills individually as opposed to just all of them en bloc. And so I think that's the goal of all of us. I think the question is we can't, probably time will not allow by Saturday to get all, we got, well, I say all 12, but we passed 1, but all the remaining 11 passed. But certainly I think it would go a long way in showing to the rest of the conference the Speaker's commitment to bringing these bills up individually.
And Robert, that was a key part of the negotiation back in January, and it quite frankly, you know, as an appropriator, you, I think, understand and share the frustration. All these things, after you do all that work in committee, they're just lumped together and there's no debate. They're just one vote and they're pushed forward.
Right. No, it's been very difficult to vote for those omnibus appropriation bills because a lot of things are lumped in them, and so I welcome the opportunity to pass these individually. What would probably be in the best interest, I think, of everyone is for these bills to be, we proceed this week and pass all 4 of those individually, and then if by Saturday, which we'll get as many as we can pass off the floor, then pass a short-term CR. And I know a lot of my colleagues don't want to do a CR, but that would avoid a shutdown with the commitment that we will maybe even be back next week, which is supposed to be a recess week for members. But I think most every member will be willing to stay in town and work on those appropriation bills to plow through the remaining 11.
So, Congressman, my take on this is those 4 bills put forward, as you said, there will be one rule, but they'll be debated individually, that this is kind of a good faith effort to try to build support for that continuing resolution if it's needed?
I think that's the Speaker's intention. Now, again, I think a lot of us, obviously would like to have seen all of these bills already on the floor, but because of various, of course, there's always the August recess, which occurs, and we're not in session during the month of August. And so that prohibits a lot of work from being done during the month of August. But and then there was obviously a couple of Jewish holidays during September that have caused us, including today being Yom Kippur. So that's why we're not voting today. And we're not going to be voting until tomorrow. So obviously it would have been best to probably have pared down the recess. But of course, that's the Speaker's decision how to do that, and the Majority Leader. And, we abide by what the schedule we're given.
Right. So, Congressman Adderholt, how much time will be allocated to debating each one of these appropriations bills? And I know the rules got to be voted on first, but I'm assuming that amendments will be allowed?
That's my understanding. And as I was on a conference call with the Speaker and the Majority Leader on Saturday, and I believe the number that was put out there was about 400 amendments to these 4 bills.
I mean, that could take a lot of legislative time on the floor to debate that.
Absolutely. No, there's no question that will take a lot of time. But like I said, I think members are very committed to getting in there and doing what it takes to get those individual appropriation bills passed. And obviously, I understand from a lot of my colleagues that are very frustrated with the process because obviously when you're spending more money than you're taking in, bad things are going to happen. And so therefore, we have got to get a handle on this. And I think some of the members are trying to really send a message to the Senate. You get your work done. We got to get our work done, or this thing is just going to explode at some point, and we better pay attention to it now as opposed to on down the road.
Congressman Adderholt, correct me if I'm wrong, but back in January when we went through 15 rounds of voting on a speaker, I mean, there was a lot of hand-wringing and consternation. And I said, I think this is a good process. A lot of stuff was being aired. Now, I know it's been difficult. I spoke to the Speaker over the weekend. I know he's having a difficult time. I talked to members of the Freedom Caucus on a regular basis. They're a little frustrated. Everybody's kind of frustrated. But we have a more conservative Republican conference than we've ever had before. And we're addressing some of these issues. And I think this process speaks to that, too. Yes, it's painful. Yes, it's uncertain. But if we're ever going to get to our out-of-control spending, this is how it's going to be done.
Yeah, no question, Tony. And this is long overdue. And I think this conference is one that has really decided that we've got to either, as the old saying goes, fish or cut bait. We've got to move forward. And that's what the message is. But if we do move on these 4 appropriation bills this week, and the Speaker brings those to the floor, regardless of what happens, and he makes a commitment to do that, then I think that will go a long way in trying to at least get a 5-day CR just to allow us to pass a few more. I really am concerned about doing over a month CR because I think that will just, everybody will say we got plenty of time, right, and so we'll just kick the can down the road. So I would be favoring doing a 7-day CR to let us just work for the next 7 days and getting more individual bills passed.
I think that would be a much better approach. So the message is get the coffee out. There's going to be some late nights there on Capitol Hill this week.
Well, very well could be, and especially with 400 amendments on 4 bills, and not to speak of the remainder of the bills that hadn't even come up yet.
All right. Congressman Robert Adderholt, always great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Tony, and thank you for all your work.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much. All right, we're going to be tracking that all this week. Congressman Adderholt, good friend, known him for a long time. He actually chairs the Values Action Team in the House. All right, coming up, As the migrant crisis continues at our southern border, recent polling shows that Americans overwhelmingly blame the Biden administration, not the Republicans, not President Trump, the Biden administration, and rightfully so. Texas Congressman Keith Self joins me to discuss what's happening at the border after the break. Don't go away. More Washington Watch straight ahead.
Everything we do begins as an idea. Before there can be acts of courage, there must be the belief that some things are worth sacrificing for. Before there can be marriage, there is the idea that man should not be alone. Before there was freedom, there was the idea that individuals are created equal. It's true that all ideas have consequences, but we're less aware that all consequences are the fruit of ideas. Before there was murder, there was hate. Before there was a Holocaust, there was the belief by some people that other people are undesirable. Our beliefs determine our behavior, and our beliefs about life's biggest questions determine our worldview. Where did I come from? Who decides what is right and wrong? What happens when I die? Our answers to these questions explain why people see the world so differently. Debates about abortion are really disagreements about where life gets its value. Debates over sexuality and gender and marriage are really disagreements about whether the rules are made by us or for us. What we think of as political debates are often much more than that. They're disagreements about the purpose of our lives and the source of truth. As Christians, our goal must be to think biblically about everything. Our goal is to help you see beyond red and blue, left and right, to see the battle of ideas at the root of it all. Our goal is to equip Christians with a biblical worldview and help them advance and defend the faith in their families, communities, and the public square. Cultural renewal doesn't begin with campaigns and elections. It begins with individuals turning from lies to truth. But that won't happen if people can't recognize a lie and don't believe truth exists. We want to help you see the spiritual war behind the political war, the truth claims behind the press release, and the forest from the trees.
Welcome back to Washington Watch. I'm your host, Tony Perkins. Good to have you with us on this Monday. Let me once again give you the Capitol switchboard number. This is a number you need to have standing by to make phone calls. Again, our Republic was made for participants, not spectators. 202-224-3121, 202-224-3121. So I want to talk about the crisis at our southern border. It's reached a level where even Democrat mayors and governors are attacking the Biden administration. Still, even as up to 10,000 migrants a day illegally enter the country, the White House has doubled down on its failed policies, blaming Republicans, believe it or not. But a recent poll from the Washington Post and ABC News show that Americans know where to point the finger. It's President Biden. Well, joining me now to discuss this is Congressman Keith Self. He serves on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, the House Veterans Affairs Committee, and is a member of the Republican Study Caucus. He represents the 3rd Congressional District of Texas. Congressman Self, welcome back to Washington Watch. Great to see you.
Great to be here, Tony. Thank you.
So let's talk about, you're from Texas. You understand the problem. You've been down to the border. 10,000 border apprehensions a day last week. Given the Biden administration's failing policies, could this be an issue that we see interjected into the funding over government this week?
I think absolutely that's the case. The Biden lawlessness and their policies on the border are becoming evident to everyone. It is really hard to stomach now some of the videos that are even coming out of my Texas colleagues who are at Eagle Pass today. It is amazing what they're seeing. And yes, it will be an issue this week as we address 4 different appropriations bills.
Now, one of the things, Keith, that you've brought up is the crisis regarding unaccompanied minors crossing the border. In 2022, I believe there was like 130,000 unattended children that entered the United States. That surpassed the previous record of 122,000 back in 2021.
And the administration admits they've lost 85,000 of those young children. They just can't account for them. They are supposed to be vetting the foster parents or the people that they leave them with. They're not. So these young children could likely be in the sex trade, boys and girls, as well as women. They could be in indentured servanthood. These are issues that the Biden administration has no answers for.
Now, wait, I want you to restate that. 80,000 that just lost. They don't know where they're at. They let them in, but they don't know where they're at.
85,000 was the last number that I heard, children that they have just lost.
That's incredible.
It is.
How is that compassionate? That's what they're saying, that this is a compassionate policy to let these people into the United States. They're letting unaccompanied minors come in, many of them being exploited, and we know that's the case.
It is. The night that I was there, I saw 4 boys traveling together, no adult with them, looked like they were maybe 8, 10 years old. What happened to those young boys? I'm sure no one knows. This is a part of the crisis that contributes to the sex trade, that contributes to the indentured servanthood. So it's not just the numbers of peoples, it's what happening to them when they get here.
Right. Well, and I wanted you to respond to this, Congressman, because according to a report released last week by the Christian group World Relief and Open Doors USA, Muslim refugees' arrivals declined into the United States. That's the Rohingya, those that are seeking refuge here in the country. They declined by 62%. Christians, that number declined by 70%. Yazidis that were fleeing to this country from persecution, 100% over the last 6 years. So we're seeing while the open border at the south and our southern border is just wide open, people are coming across, those who are actually seeking refuge in this country because of religious persecution is plummeting. This is no longer a safe place. People are not coming. They're not being allowed to come seeking refuge here.
Well, we don't really know why the drops are. It could be that we're just so focused on the illegal immigration that we don't have any attention for anything else, because as of, I think, yesterday, one of the border control agents said they're simply overwhelmed. There is no border. President Biden has no respect for the border, has no respect for the law. He considers Congress irrelevant. Even if we passed more laws through the Congress, would that change the Biden behavior? Would it allow more people who are actually suffering persecution come to America? Or does the system just remain overwhelmed?
I think this is intentional. I think they're intentionally allowing the southern border to be overrun, and they could care less about religious persecution. I mean, there's you might not be familiar with this, but there is a German homeschool family currently living in East Tennessee, came here 15 years ago. The Obama administration tried to boot them out, then Trump left them alone. Well, now they're being told they're going to be sent back to Germany. They're here. They escaped because of homeschooling being persecuted in Germany, and now the Biden administration wants to kick them out.
That's just pettiness, Tony. That's just abuse of the rule of law because they can. That's all that is. It's just pettiness.
I mean, the unfair, unjust application of the laws under the Biden administration is deeply troubling. Final question for you, Congressman Self. What is your expectation this week as the House looks down this 5 days? I mean, we've got 5 days to fund government. What do you see as the outcome?
I hope that we can pass some bills. I'm understanding what I'm hearing through my sources is that the Ukraine funding is still in several bills that we will hear this week. And there are still a number of people who have said they will not vote for the rule nor the bill if the Ukraine funding is in it. This almost looks to me like it's a setup for failure. If it is a setup for failure in order to blame the conservatives, then I go back to that the frustration, the anger that we're hearing across America today, because I don't think people are ready to accept more debt, more lawlessness by the Biden administration. I think this is our chance to actually make a change in the Congress and in the federal government this year, because we have the people behind us this year.
Yeah. I agree with you. Congressman Keith Self of Texas, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
All right, folks, after the break, what is the real crisis facing America? I'll talk about it. Don't go away.
All of us are born with the desire to find truth and meaning. Where did I come from? What happens when I die? While our answers to these questions may divide us, we are united in our need for the freedom to answer life's biggest questions and make life's biggest decisions for ourselves. That's why religious freedom matters for everyone. Religious freedom matters because the powerful have long wanted to control those who are less powerful. Religious freedom matters because the freedom of those who are different is often threatened by those who believe different is dangerous. Leah Sheribu, a Christian teenager in Nigeria, remains a captive of Boko Haram for her refusal to renounce her Christian faith. Chinese pastor Wang Yi is serving a 9-year sentence for speaking publicly against the Chinese government. All of this because people in power decided different is dangerous. At the Center for Religious Liberty at Family Research Council, we promote religious freedom for everyone because the only alternative is religious freedom for no one. We encourage Americans and the American government to engage and advocate for the persecuted, and they do. We work every day to bring good news to the afflicted, to proclaim liberty to captives and freedom to prisoners. We do it because that's what Jesus does. We work to give freedom to others because we ourselves have been set free.
To Washington Watch, thanks so much for joining us. Our nation is in crisis. It's not a gun crisis. It's not a fentanyl crisis. It's not a border crisis. It's not even a government funding crisis. It is a moral and a spiritual crisis. A sickening video that went viral last weekend fully displays this moral and spiritual crisis. The video was of two 17-year-old males who were apparently identifying as heartless, demon-possessed thugs who recorded their joyride in a stolen car. The video shows the two cheering as they ram and force one car off the road. Then they spotted 64-year-old Andreas Probst, a retired police officer, taking his morning bike ride. The driver asked his passenger if he was ready to capture their feet on camera. So swerving into the bike lane behind Probst, they blew the horn and then plowed into the back of him, throwing him onto the windshield, over the car, and onto the pavement as they accelerated. The thug in the passenger seat turned to catch on camera Probst bounce onto the road where he died. The driver was arrested shortly thereafter and taken to the juvenile detention center. The Clark County District Attorney's Office is reportedly looking into charging the driver as an adult. Now, don't expect the White House or others that see violent crime as little more than justification to grab more power over law-abiding citizens to pay any attention to a drive-over killing. However, this crime is so shocking. Some are asking, how did we arrive at such a place where cold-blooded murder is callously carried out like a virtual video game? Well, should we really, should we be surprised? As a nation, we've pushed God to the outskirts of society. Instead of our children being taught that they are created in the image of God and therefore have value, we're telling them that they come from animals, and then we're shocked when they act like animals. This, my friends, is a moral and a spiritual crisis. But don't expect political leaders, especially those on the left, to acknowledge that fact because they refuse to look beyond the symptoms. Take the mayor of Chicago, Brandon Johnson, who is calling for city-owned grocery stores to be placed in neighborhoods that have become what he calls food deserts. Why are they food deserts? Well, Walmart and Whole Foods have shuttered their stores because of unsustainable losses. Retailers nationwide are going under and shutting their doors because of a $100 billion shoplifting epidemic moving across this nation. I mean, it's gotten so bad here in Washington, D.C., that almost everything is behind locked plexiglass. Now, commentators and conservatives point to lax policies like California's Prop 47, which reduced theft from a potential felony to a misdemeanor. Now, certainly these lax policies only compound the lawlessness fostered by depleted and demoralized police departments in the wake of the left's defund the police movement. But it's not just civil government that has facilitated this moral and spiritual crisis that threatens the very future of our country. I've often been asked this question while in conversation with political leaders. Tony, why do pastors want us to vote on and speak about issues that they won't preach about from the pulpit? Wow. Well, to be sure, many pastors are preaching on these issues. Some of them were at the recent Pray Vote Stand Summit. Jack Hibbs, Gary Hamrick, Vincent Matthews, and many others. But far too many fail to see their God-given role to not just preach the truth, but to challenge people to live by the truth in every aspect of life. Pastors must rediscover their prophetic voice to address this moral and spiritual crisis. Yes, the lawless, anti-God policies of government have fostered this violent and deadly environment, and the church has, for the most part, only whispered its objections. But what about the parents? Now, I know the government has usurped the role of parents in many ways, hiding critical information from them about their children's mental and spiritual well-being at school. In fact, in some cases, they've refused to allow parents to get counseling for their children if it's not in lockstep with leftist ideology. But a recent report from King's College London suggests parents in the United States are not concerned with their children being civil or even obedient. Coming in nearly dead last in the 24 countries surveyed, only 21% of U.S. adults say obedience was a priority for their children. What did rank near the top of their priorities? Tolerance. Well, there was little tolerance for Mr. Probst. To the 21st century ear, it may sound archaic to quote a founding father, but after all, they did craft what has become the longest surviving written charter of government in the world. So maybe they knew something, and maybe we can learn something about how to keep this experiment in liberty going. John Adams, America's second president, warned, quote, "Our Constitution was made only for a moral and a religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other." In other words, if we don't go beyond the litany of crises facing our nation and seeing them for what they are, just symptoms, whether it be the border, fentanyl, guns, or stolen cars that are used to run over innocent people. If we don't go beyond that to see what truly is at the heart of this crisis, we'll lose this country as we know it, because we will have missed the moral and the spiritual crisis confronting us. We must return to God and to His Word. And that is where I stand.
The world is hurting, streets are filled with crime, families are broken, sin is celebrated, and God is mocked. Everywhere we look, the wages of our sin are on full display. As Christians, we know that surrender to God's will is the solution to our biggest problems, but not everyone agrees. Even in church, we hear people say the most important thing is to be tolerant, that we shouldn't impose our morality on other people, and that loving our neighbor means celebrating what they do. But you can't do that. It's not that you don't love your neighbor, you do, but you care about God's opinion more than your neighbor's opinion, and this makes you different. In fact, sometimes it makes you feel alone, like you're the only one. But there is good news. You are not alone, not even close. Research has found that there are 59 million American adults who are a lot like you. There are millions of people around the country who are born again, deeply committed to practicing their faith, and believe the Bible is the reliable Word of God. But that's not all. They're also engaged in our government. They're voters. They're more likely to be involved in their community, and they're making a difference in elections. The problem is that a lot of them feel alone too. We want to change that. FRC wants to connect these 59 million Americans to speak the truth together, no matter the cost. If you want to learn more about this group and what it means to be a spiritually active, governance-engaged conservative, or if you want to find out if you are one of these SageCons yourself, go to frc.org/SageCon and take the quiz to find out. The world is hurting, and we have the solution. We can't do it alone, but we can do it if we work together. That's what we're working toward every day. Join us. Go to frc.org/SAGECON, SageCon, to learn more. That's SAGECON, SageCon, to learn more.
I'm often asked by people, Tony, how do you stay encouraged? How do you deal with all of the stuff in Washington, D.C., the negative policies that are attacking our faith, our family, and our freedoms? Well, you want me to let you in on the secret? It's called the Word of God. And that is why the Family Research Council embarked on Stand on the Word, a 2-year journey through the Bible. It's a chronological Bible reading plan with just 10 to 15 minutes a day. In 2 years, you will have covered the entire Bible. And to go along with this, Monday through Friday, I do a morning devotional that goes along with the reading of the day. It's all designed to encourage you on this journey because the Word of God, as the psalmist said, in my affliction, here's my comfort. Your Word gives me life. That is our source of strength. To find out more, go to TonyPerkins.com or frc.org/Bible. And I invite you to join me every morning for our Stand on the Word.
FRC, celebrating 40 years with Congresswoman Lisa McClain.
In Congress, it's tough. And you get hit, you get bombs thrown at you from all different sides. And at times, you have a tendency to get down. FRC approaches things in a very different way. It approaches it with a faith-based principle, in a faith-based manner, which is really lacking not only in Congress, but I would say in America today. FRC is an organization that provides an optimistic, hopeful, positive view of the future.
It's one of our many friends on Capitol Hill, Congresswoman Lisa McClain, fighting for faith, family, and freedom. Well, from top to bottom, the left is hostile toward parents. Now, you might recall this clip of a teacher in Arizona questioning the right of parents to determine what their children are taught.
I I have a master's degree because when I got certified, I was told I had to have a master's degree to be an Arizona certified teacher. We all have advanced degrees. What do the parents have? Are we vetting the backgrounds of our parents? Are we allowing the parents to choose the curriculum and the books that our children are going to read? I think that it's a mistake.
That is real. That is Alicia Messing, again, out in Arizona. But, you know, that attitude in the classroom it really shouldn't surprise us. When we see the White House creating an FBI task force to track down parents involved in education, speaking out against the indoctrination in their children, and you have Secretary of Education Miguel Cardona saying this on Friday.
I respect differences of opinions. I don't have too much respect for people that are misbehaving in public and then acting as if they know what's right for kids.
Misbehaving? Maybe that should be challenging the indoctrination? Well, joining me now with her reaction is Meg Kilgannon, Senior Fellow for Education Studies here at the Family Research Council. She served in the Department of Education during the Trump administration. Meg, welcome back to the program.
Great to be here, Tony.
2 great clips, huh?
Wow, it's what parents always hear and feel when they're trying to engage with their children's schools. Unfortunately,
but think about it for a moment. Should we be surprised that that's the attitude in the classroom when that is the attitude of the Secretary of Education?
Right. I mean, in the clip he says, you know, people, but we know he really is talking about parents. But there were other people who were misbehaving in public during the COVID pandemic when school districts wanted to open schools again, particularly in North Carolina. There was one notorious incident where the teachers union in one county sort of terrorized the superintendent's home of another county because the other county was going to open up schools. And that was the footage that you saw with the hearses and the coffins. I mean, that was misbehavior. He's trying to imply that all the misbehavior is on the side of the parents or on the side of the right, but we know that the left has their own misbehavior to deal with.
Meg, it would suggest to me that parents have touched a nerve with the left.
I think so. I think the fact that he doesn't use the word parents tells you exactly the kind of power that parents have and the influence that he knows parents have and rightly have, the legitimacy of their authority, and the fact that he can't even directly attack that.
Now, I said this before. You know, back in 2010, I have a benefit of being here for a while, and longevity gives you a good perspective. We had the Tea Party back in 2009, 2010 election. I really believe that what we're seeing, what's going to drive the 2024 election, is the new wave of the Tea Party, but it's the parents, it's the mama bears who have said enough of this. This is our children.
Right. Right. I mean, the cases that you see of people reading books that are objectionable at the school board and having their mics cut off, these comments from the secretary, comments from any number of candidates and governors all across the country, are the disregard for parental rights by the Democratic Party and those on the left is very real. And they seem to be doubling down on this message. I mean, he didn't make these comments by accident. The video itself is only 3 minutes and 30 seconds long. It's really worth watching the whole thing.
He said this at the very beginning of I want to make sure I make this point.
Right.
And back to the teacher in Arizona, I mean, these are our children and this is their future that we're concerned about. And to say, well, I've got an advanced degree, what do these parents have? Well, they have children.
Right.
These are their children. They have the right. They've been given the authority by God. They don't need you to sign off on or some institution of higher learning to give them a certificate to say they're qualified to determine what their children are taught.
Exactly. When these kind of clips come to light, it's almost gratifying in a way because this is parents. We feel this in the attitude so often from the elected officials that we try to engage with, and we always try civilly. That's not, we're usually not the ones that are creating the problem, but we're responding to something.
But again, this just shows me that it's getting under their skin. So that would tell me we just need to double down.
Absolutely.
We need more of this, and FRC Action has some resources available.
We have the school board boot camps at frcaction.org/schools. And we have, we had at the Pray Vote Stand Summit that beautiful example of the Sonia Shaw, who's I answered the call, run for school board, and she's doing wonderful things, truly changing the face of California politics from her seat on the school board.
But by the way, Meg, before I let you go, you mentioned the Pray Vote Stand Summit. You were part of some of the panels there. What was the highlight for you at the summit?
I really loved meeting with the people who were attending. And I mean, it's always exciting to hear from the presidents and to be the presidential candidates and to be in the same room with them and really get to size them up. But meeting with the people who support FRC and who follow our work and who are really committed to making a difference in their own communities, that's always the favorite thing for me.
And I sensed a lot of, and I don't want to say enthusiasm, but I mean, it's enthusiasm, but I would say a better word would be determination.
Right.
That just as we've been talking about with the parents, there's a thing, we're not giving up without a fight.
Right.
And it's an optimistic fight. It's not like a fight of desperation. It's an optimistic fight that, you know what, I believe we can win.
I think, yes. And we believe that, we believe in God, right?
Yeah.
We believe that He is in charge and in control. And that is what gives us the courage to continue to mount battles against people in seemingly authoritative places, like at the Secretary of Education's office, right? But he can say what he says, but we know what is true, that our children are given to us by God for us to form and to grow, teach them to grow to follow God.
And we know how to rattle those cages up there at those high places.
Absolutely.
Meg Kilgannon, always great to talk with you.
Great to be here.
Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks.
Well, if you were with us last week, we were discussing what took place at the United Nations and the WHO as they were pushing forward this pandemic declaration. Now, former Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann was with me last week, and we discussed that 11 nations withheld their support for the declaration for a variety of reasons, which prevented the United Nations from rubber stamping a pandemic response declaration that contained many objectionable terms, including censorship of anything they deemed misinformation, as well as listing universal abortion access. Ultimately, this would cede authority to unelected bureaucrats. What I see as I dig into this more and more is that the World Health Organization really wants to be the vanguard of global governance. Joining me now to discuss this and more is Jim Roguski. He is a member of the Law and Activism Committee at the World Council for Health, and he tracks the World Health Organization and what they're pushing forward with this pandemic accord. Jim, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Well, thank you very much for having me. Appreciate it.
You categorized this last week, this meeting at the United Nations, and the failure to get unanimous consent, a defeat for the UN and for the WHO. You even called it a glorious failure. Tell us why.
Well, they were trying to pull off a bit of theater. You know, it was a theatrical production, and I'll try to make it very, very simple. If a committee of people that are members of Congress got together in a room and televised it and said that they had adopted an agreement and led people to believe that it was actually Congress that had adopted that agreement, I think most people would realize that that was a theatrical production that did not reflect reality. So the 11 nations did their homework. They know the rules, and what they saw that was being attempted was not the same as, the actual General Assembly meeting discussing and voting on a declaration that the UN proper then got behind. And so they put a wrench in the works of the propaganda machine, and that hasn't stopped the media from misrepresenting it. You can see headlines that people come away with, oh, the UN adopted this. No, it was a bunch of people in a room that said they agree to it, but they were forced to put a little caveat in their statement that said, well, we're adopting this subject to, at some later date, we'll try to get this before the actual UN General Assembly. So, they were exposed for the shenanigans that they were attempting to, propagate this propaganda.
But Jim, the media really hasn't reported on it. They haven't reported much of this at all. Plus, when you look at the statements coming out of the United Nations, they just kind of sweep all of that under the rug. In fact, I want to play a clip of the Director General, Tedros Ghebreyesus. This was today over in Geneva, making a comment on last week's meeting. Clip 7.
Last week was a historic week for health, with 3 high-level meetings on health issues at the UN General Assembly in New York. Member states approved strong political declarations on pandemic prevention, preparedness and response, universal health coverage, and tuberculosis. All 3 are relevant to the work of this region.
How do you respond to that, Jim?
Well, you can see how they spin a failure. He said member states approved. That leads someone to want to believe that that was some sort of an official, statement, but it's propaganda. What was said was that this is subject to being presented at some future date before the actual United Nations General Assembly. And so, that is misinformation because they don't let people know that, this is coming. And, once you understand how they play the propaganda game, those 11 nations saw it coming and they called it out in advance. And they actually used the word pretend in their letter to the president of the General Assembly.
Pretty well-written letter, a pretty strong letter. So let me just ask you this, Jim. This is my take on what the UN, how they've spun this, how the WHO has spun this. They want everybody to think that, oh, yeah, everybody is for this, therefore you should be for it too.
Exactly. And what I'd like to do is a little bit of what those 11 nations did. Please be aware that next week, October 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, the working group with the WHO's amendments to the international health regulations is scheduled to have meetings where they're going to be discussing some very important issues. Definitions of terms, things like the word vaccine, what does that really mean? There is not a legal definition of vaccine or pandemic or safe or effective. They're going to be talking about the scope of the amendments to the regulations, the principles, things like dignity, human rights, and fundamental freedoms. But most importantly, next week, they're going to be discussing what most people call a vaccine passport, but they refer to as the Global Digital Health Certification Network. Now, they're likely to do all of that in secret. And so what they do is they try to have all of these meetings in secret. And this is the next to the last meeting in regards to the amendments to the international health regulations. People need to know that last year at their World Health Assembly in May of 2022, amendments were adopted. And the deadline to reject those amendments is coming up very rapidly, December 1st. Nobody in the media, nobody in Congress or the Senate, and quite frankly, nobody in any parliamentary body around the world has spoken up, because there is still 2 months left for every nation. And I am praying on a regular basis, I mean this sincerely, that national leaders around the world come to their senses and do what's needed. Just simply write a letter to the WHO rejecting the amendments that were adopted last year. And everyone, I hope, will pay attention to the negotiations that are coming next week for over 300 more amendments. We must speak now or forever, realize that they're doing this.
Live under this global power grab that the WHO and the United Nations is making. Jim, we're out of time, but we'll follow up next week when that meeting takes place, and we're certainly going to prompt people to take action. Jim, thanks so much for joining us. Always great to see you. Appreciate your insight.
Thank you very much for all you do.
And folks, you need to weigh in on this. You can sign this petition. Get the United States out of the World Health Organization. Text WHO to 67742, 67742, WHO. We're out of time for today. Lord willing, we'll see you again tomorrow. Until then, keep standing.
Washington Watch with Tony Perkins is brought to you by Family Research Council and is entirely listener-supported. Portions of the show discussing candidates are brought to you by Family Research Council Action. For more information on anything you've heard today, or to find out how you can partner with us in our ongoing efforts to promote faith, family, and freedom, visit TonyPerkins.com. Also, to leave a comment about Washington Watch, call our watch line at 1-866-372-7234. That's 1-866-372-7234.